Hello and welcome to Beyond the Index, a new 5-part series designed to be your strategic compass for navigating today's fast-moving B2B world. This series is powered by Dentsu B2B's latest Superpower Index, which is the 5th iteration of the largest global B2B study of buyer behavior in the world. It brings together insights from 16,000 plus individual B2B buyers, as well as 35,000 plus different experience data points, and it really just helps us understand what it takes to win. In Beyond the Index, we dive deeper into key topics with experts from across our business and leaders in the B2B industry. So let's get started. I'm Jake Hurd. I'm the EVP of Strategy for Dentsu B2B. And for lots of reasons, for me, it feels like there's never been a better time to be in B2B marketing. However, it's very complicated, as we all know, and very fast moving. And maybe more importantly, it's getting more and more competitive. So what creates differentiation for B2B brands in their respective categories? Well, we believe it's experience. And today, I'm very pleased to be joined by two fantastic CX specialists, Holly and Simon. I'll let you both introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here today, Jake. I'm Holly Adu-Kissi, and I have a mix of B2B and B2C background from roles such as Director of Product, Head of E-commerce, I've been Head of Account Management, and a Director of Customer Success.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jake. My name's Simon Coghlan. I'm an Executive Client Partner in the Merkle business, which is part of Dentsu. My role is to help our clients get the best return from their digital investments in experience, data, and technology.
Thanks, guys. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Look, we all know that, and can actually empirically prove that businesses that excel in creating those really memorable, sticky, best connected experiences, they definitely stand out and definitely build those much more longer standing customer relationships. But a lot of B2B brands now are starting to really step up their game. And part of the research this year, we wanted to really just dive into and understand how to stay relevant and how to respond to actually what customers want. One of the key findings in the research is actually that there's a roughly 50-50 split now between personal and professional buying drivers, and it's really starting to stabilize. It's something we've seen year on year for a few years now. Ultimately, when we break down these decision drivers, whether being professional like price or compliance or ease of integration versus the more personal things such as being aligned to individual values or ethics, the question really for me is, especially at the larger enterprise level, how do we think about designing consistent experiences, particularly with complicated buying groups with lots of different individuals, each with their own sort of channels and touch points and their own kind of individual motivations? Holly, can you hear your thoughts?
Sure. I think there are a couple of things at play. And with large organizations, it does get tough to have the communication internally first be consistent. So I think that's one of the first areas that you need. Everybody in your organization needs to be reading from the same playbook. And that has to be driven by your internal values. And the customers of those large enterprises want to feel the authentic realness. And if you're not saying, these are our values and we want you to buy from us, to then pass that on to your consumers, that authenticity has to be there first. That will then play across. If your internal employees and organization is all driving behind one mission, that gets demonstrated to your buyers and they will then send that to their customers. And I think after some of the tough times that we've experienced over the last 5-6 years, there's that desire, that need, that hunger for more of that authenticity throughout. And that will start to show up across different touch points in your organization.
Yeah, cool. Simon, are you seeing similar kind of hunger?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think authenticity is something that definitely needs to come from within. But when you're thinking about designing that through an experience, it really has to be done with purpose across rational and emotional decision points all the way through that sort of complex buying journey, because everyone in a buying group is going to be oscillating sort of between those rational and emotional states as they are making decisions to push them through to the next stage. So when we're thinking about how do we manifest that from an experience point of view, I think the trap that too many try to fall into is there's just one perfect, linear, streamlined experience. And if we nail that, then we're going to succeed. It's really a misnomer. I think what we need to do is understand each different element of the touch point, really understand your journey, do the analysis, right? There's so many access to tools, traditional analytics, experience analytics, sentiment analysis. And at Merkle, we do a lot of sort of qualitative research, customer interviews, prototypes and testing across that sort of buying decision journey to understand really where are those moments that matter for a rational decision, for an emotional decision. And once you understand the moments that matter, you can measure. And if you can measure, you can optimize.
Cool. I mean, just to drill down slightly on that. So again, you can do a lot of things to identify those kind of moments that matter. What do you think would probably be the most 3 or 4 most, well, maybe 2, like what are the most important ones that you would probably say are the starting blocks?
The important one is often the first touch, right? It is the first impression, the first interaction as that sort of early research phase that everyone in a buying group is really starting in a similar position. Nailing that first touch, identifying, understanding what the drivers are, and then optimizing that first touch is really key to success.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the research itself, actually, we found that the first touch or the first interaction between a customer and the vendor is often one of the lowest experience points. I guess maybe Holly, in your experience, like what's the sort of the quick wins to maybe fix that? How would you go about fixing something like that?
Yeah, 2 parts, I would say. One is speed. We take for granted if you are quick to be responsive to your vendor and you already show you care, which is more the second thing of, I'm not looking at this as just a business partnership. We're in this together. We're in this for the long haul. And as fast as you can get back to them. Like in a couple of the industries, we were saying someone's looking to understand our business and we want a demo, and it was taking a week, maybe 2 weeks to respond. We got that down to about an hour in one of our businesses. And those customers, even if we didn't answer all of their questions, the fact that we were talking to that vendor that quickly made them feel like you're important to me and it matters and I'm a priority. And then we could enhance the experiences in those touch points that we could measure from there.
Fantastic. What was the second point?
The care.
Oh.
You have to have the care. And that speed and time to talk to them quickly, 2 weeks, they don't even know if you're around anymore, to an hour, that shows you care. And that makes them feel like they're that priority.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Prioritization is a nice segue into my second question. One of the other big trends we're seeing in the research at the moment is what we're calling getting back to business. So with the influence of the broader kind of environment and the macroeconomics going on, it's playing a much bigger role now. Buyers are looking more than ever to their partners to integrate more smoothly in their business operations. So the fact that we've seen that decision driver like literally integrate smoothly with our process and operations as being the biggest leap from position 16 last year to position 2, what do you think this means for experiences today? And I'm thinking specifically around sales and success teams as well. How do you follow through on like a marketing promise to actually ensure that consistent customer journey, even like post-sale? Holly?
I kind of have 2 answers for this for you. So the first one is really your company to the vendor trying to be the most integrated pieces of it, because they don't want to have a list at the end of the month of 10 different software that they subscribe to, right? I think there's a shift back to more of that suites and stacks question that we've had a couple of years back, where you want more of the suite, and you don't necessarily have to have it be all one big suite, but it's got to be a suite that does more things for you so that you aren't paying 10 different subscriptions to different vendors and they're doing all these different pieces and you as a business owner are losing efficiencies. And so when it then comes to the post-sale side where you're thinking about that from the customer, you want the success teams, the account teams, and all of them to really be thinking about, do they know the business? Where are the gaps and what other parts of the product? So, is it an HR piece? Is it a finance piece? Is it an operating platform system? And if your software can do, say, those 3 things, and that saves you end up getting 20% more of the business or the vendor's wallet, and you then demand more of their time, and your success rep or your client representative that can go to them and talk to them, they feel like you know their business and you're really, truly, genuinely trying to help them operate more efficiently. They're going to want to stick with you and stay with you longer and ask you, what's the next other part that's going to integrate that I might have to buy down the road?
Yeah, cool. I like that. And Simon, like, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on this as well. I'm sure you've seen a lot of programs, especially where you need to focus on like a smooth after sales transition and manage those buyer expectations. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've spent most of my career in the digital solutions and service side of things rather than products, but so much of what you said, Holly, translates across. Unfortunately, through the kind of boom of digital transformation in Australia, there was a bit of an adage of marketing makes the promises, sales does the selling, and then delivery comes in and rescopes and refactors all of the solution. And that is absolutely the fastest way to erode trust and get a procurement team going straight back out to market to pick a competitor. So I really believe that the best kind of after sales starts with pre-sales, and I think your data is really proving that now than ever before. You know, as part of that pre-sales process, you need to be having a conversation around the total experience. You know, the solution, the product, what the buyers are purchasing from you is a change in the status quo. So we need to really early identify how is it changing the user experience, the employee experience, what are we integrating into, how does it impact the ecosystem, what are the roles that are going to change, what are the processes that are going to change. If all of that is understood early, you've got to build that trust, and then you're giving your implementation and your post sales and service teams really the best chance for success through sort of consistent expectation management. The other thing that a client said to me pretty early in my career was, I can't manage a secret, right? And when we're sort of doing service implementations, there's a lot that can go wrong. You know, there's quite a lot of moving pieces. It's not often formulaic. And so when we have a culture of transparency through our teams to understand what's easy, what's hard, and then we're partnering with stakeholders so then they can manage up the line to CEOs and to boards with that transparency. Nothing is a secret. That's when, you know, after sales and that client service can really thrive.
Yeah,
if I can just jump in on that, I think you're also hitting on classic change management, and it needs to be identified earlier because there's a reluctancy with the buyer to realize they have to change their business processes. But you've bought new technology or you've brought in a new piece of something you've integrated, and that has to change. And that's also, I would say, where the post-sale side has to help their vendor realize, I can help you through this transition.
I mean, you beat me to the punch. I was going to say something very similar. I mean, obviously, we're talking about sort of pre-sales and post-sales and the whole process. As a marketer, I think marketing has a role in part of that. So how do we get a better seat at the table? Again, we've all come from different experiences ourselves. So from a marketing standpoint, what would help the marketing teams in B2B have that conversation about broader experiences? Who do they need to talk to? Is it a new role that needs creating? I'm just interested to get your sense of what that might look like.
I think, Jake, yeah, thanks, Holly. I think, again, it's about that total experience. So understanding what are you trying to drive out of the investment that you're making in new process, in new technology, in new experience. And how is that then getting pushed through to your internal stakeholders, your employees, but then often your customers? What is the marketing plan that is going to be behind maximising your return on that investment? I think that the seat at the table is there. It just needs to be thought about earlier rather than later.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I mean, look, for me personally, I think some of those roles are changing now. It's not necessarily a CMO thing to solve for, which explains why I think we've seen a rise of the chief digital officer, the chief customer officer, the chief revenue officer. I think it's having ownership of the total thing. Talking of ownership and slightly change of tact, be interested to get your thoughts on AI, because it wouldn't be a podcast series if we didn't mention AI. This year in the Superpowers Index, we've actually dug really deep into the role that AI is playing in the buying journey. There's some really interesting insights in there, including like 40% of buyers are actively using AI as part of the purchase decision. I think that's no surprise to anyone that's the case. The key areas of focus, though, within that are actually researching and shortlisting options, the customization of products, speed of transactions, and then the ongoing after sales and customer support. Again, Holly, I'll probably throw it to you first, actually. What are your thoughts on this? Like, what can brands do to really just prepare and optimize the experiences that AI bring? Like this, what's the step change in the buying process there?
First, it's just talking about it, saying you're an AI first and AI forward type company. Most aren't. And so there's this slowness to change that the employees in your organization may not be aware of. They don't realize the speed at which the change is happening. And then therefore, anyone else that's in the cascade that happens after that doesn't recognize that it's also playing a role. So recognizing it up front and saying, we're using this to craft more tailored experiences for you and making it easier for you to buy from us, for example, or for you to interact with us, or we're going to use our high level strategic thinking to the best of its ability as what humans should be doing versus what we can get AI to work efficiently for us.
I love that. Simon, same question to you, I guess, right?
Yeah, it can't be a podcast without mentioning AI, absolutely.
Can't be anything without mentioning AI.
I know.
Yeah, there's new tools every single day, right? And we see that absolutely on the sales side and, from your research on the buying side. I think on the sales side, there are so many new tools to compress that cycle. And that's in response to the compression that you talk about in the superpowers index on the buying side, right? The speed of information is what is changing here in terms of expectation. And so I think that from an experience point of view, there's a couple of different ways that businesses and brands can win. This is a new area of opportunity. I think about it from an internal and an external point of view. From an internal point of view, it's really around tools, right? So we know that procurement teams are using, buying tools to assist with their process. Internally, what tools are the businesses using to react to that? Is it a large knowledge model? So when there are tricky questions that come in from an RFP around product security, you've got a model which is providing a tailored response that's still compliant. The part of the superpowers index showed that there was, a real propensity around self-service creeping in. What is your chatbot capability? What is the information that you are able to expose to these buyers who don't yet want a human interaction? They want that machine interaction first before then that important human interaction. So I think there's a lot of internal things that businesses can do to be ready, but there's also the external things which are equally as important, and that's about AI legibility. It's about really a new audience. We now have a machine audience that we need to be able to serve with experiences. If your data, if your content, if your messaging is fuzzy and not well structured, you're going to be hard to buy from, like you mentioned. There's an opportunity for businesses to really get consistent, clear and structured information through websites, through data, and have that exposed and ready for AI consumption. So when they are going through this, early phase research and even comparison process from a buying perspective, you're right up there. You've established trust. You've got those proof points that have been read by AI, and you've kind of cleared that first hurdle, and you've got your way into where it's time for human interaction.
Yeah, amazing. I don't disagree. The biggest challenge, I think, personally, and again, I'd be interested to hear both of your thoughts, is, in the consumer space, brands are very quick to respond to that, I think. In B2B, is the speed similar? Are we slightly behind the curve, or is it just a different curve? It's a bit of a bold question.
You like your bold questions.
Do you like them?
From a business standpoint, I would say it's lagging.
Okay.
I don't have data to back it up. But just from my experience within the businesses that I've been in, the talk is there, but the reality isn't quite yet there, and there's still skepticism. Show me how. How is this really going to work? Besides, maybe you wrote a nice email or some of the very simple uses of AI, right? Well, how will AI actually integrate the platforms for me? How will it save me money? Prove it to me. There's still that skepticism that I think is there. And if you can nail explaining that, not only to your internal folks who say, yeah, I use it all the time, but really do they? To everyone who's then purchasing from your product, or the vendor interaction and engagement that you've got, and being transparent about it, right? Because there's also, how far is AI going to go, and questions about that. And if you're using it, can I also trust your business to do business with me? Whereas if you take more of the safety approach, right, which we know from an Anthropic perspective, where it's the focus is on safety versus the tool and that itself, and you resonate with that type of message, do that same thing with your buyer to vendor engagement.
Perfect.
And I think it's hard. And, different industries are going to move at different paces, dependent on the competition. If there is pressure for you to have the building blocks in place to take advantage of AI tools, then you're going to be faster to move. But getting all of your data centralized, readable, accessible, and actionable is a big step. Moving everyone onto API-first systems, getting accessible, unified data, it's potentially really, really expensive. And if there's not that compelling value proposition or business case or pressure from your competitors, you're going to lag. So I don't think it's necessarily B2B versus B2C. I think it's correlated to how much competition there is in your industry and who's going to move first and who's going to lag.
I also think we haven't seen anyone fail with it yet. So we don't know what some of the dangers are or some of the confusion might be. And that adds to some of the hesitation, which I think is creating some of the lag.
Perfect. Well, talking about lagging, we've looked at over 35,000 buyer experiences over the years. For the winning brands, the top 2 ways businesses actually reduce that sales cycle, so actually to reduce the lag of the cycle itself, are to, number one, to actually make the first interactive memorable. I talked about that a little bit earlier. And number 2, actually investing in advocacy and community, which I think is quite interesting. What we've seen through the data itself is if you look at those 2 areas, you could actually reduce those deal cycle sizes by about 16 weeks in some cases, which is significant. Holly, I guess, does that make sense in your experience? Does that sound plausible? And where else do you see those kind of CX kind of opportunities or those breakthrough moments that can actually be turned into something tangible?
Yeah, it's a tailorization or really understanding your ICPs and using the data and using the AI to be able to get to that, and then being human to human and going out and listening in a different type of way. That's what's creating the memory, right? Like whether it's you're in their office and you're having a brunch for them or a lunch for them, you're there and you're human and you're interacting, and I think that makes the memory there. And if you can replicate that at scale, that's going to get you faster into the timing cycle of things.
Simon, anything to add?
Well, I think about it from, again, an experience point of view. Right? And you see some examples of where businesses that kind of understand the value of different parts of that experience are the ones that are able to adapt and change and capitalize. Even the old days of printing with HP, right? They sort of understood, the moments that matter within their experience, and they found that with their office printers, that there was obviously a moment when offices would run out of ink and they wouldn't have reordered it, and that was causing friction. Right? It always happened to me before a big pitch when you were printing something, always at the worst possible time. But sort of understanding, the advocacy in the entire customer journey and cycle, they created their instant ink program, and their smart machines would then figure out, okay, this office is printing about this much through this machine, they're going to run out of ink on this date, and they would sort of pre-order and send ink to that particular office. I think another example of friction within that experience and understanding that customer journey all the way through is Tesla, through their service centres now, have understood that there is a negative experience that their customers are having globally when they have to wait 4, 5, 6 days for parts to be shipped into that particular location after the service has been booked. So they're now exploring self-diagnosis within their vehicles so they can understand when a part is going to fail, pre-order it, push it out to that particular location in the world. So then when the customer goes in to get their car serviced, they're ready to go. So I think, again, understanding, where are those moments that matter within the journey and being able to optimize and solve for those, or even create new business opportunities around them, is a really fertile playing field.
No, I think they're great examples of looking at that total journey and finding like a single point instead of trying to eat the whole elephant. I'm conscious of time, so final question as we're coming to a bit of a close. What critical activities would you actually suggest to a business to do now if they're looking to improve that buyer customer experience? I'm thinking, talking about the whole thing, it's like if there's 30 or 40 or 50 things to be done, like what are the 3 or 4 most important things to focus on, and how do you prioritize and identify those things? And we touched a little bit on that earlier, but I think that's a good way just to close off the conversation. Simon, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a long list for sure. If I was to pick a couple from what I see in sort of service implementation, two things are really like opportunity areas for brands to excel. The first is that data unification piece, kind of being AI legible, AI ready. We're probably in a bit of an AI bubble, but it's still not going to go away. I think the faster you are having unified data, actionable data, the better you're going to be able to respond to agentic and automated commerce. And again, we're seeing that through the trends in the buying process through the report. The second piece that we see working every single time with our clients is really understanding the moments that matter in your customer journey and making sure that you're measuring them and you are experimenting around them and you're optimizing them for that rational decision, for that emotional decision.
I think for myself, I'll take it back a little bit further into the old school thought of A/B type testing, right? So take your various ICPs. Well, you have one, but there are always tertiary and secondary type ones that you're going to be dealing with, and really hone in what the anticipated impression is that you want to make, but test it beforehand and then fraction it off. And I think you should be able to do a 1 or 2 type test with this ICP, 1 or 2 with these guys, and really try and see what's going to work best and use AI and use the data that you've got to make those the best experiences from the beginning that you possibly can.
Fantastic. Guys, look, we're pretty much at time, but I do want to thank you both very much. I think you shared some really valuable insights and some practical tips, actually, I would say, certainly that would help people. I guess in closing, I would say that it doesn't have to be difficult. It's actually just about if you can isolate the 1 or 2 things that really matter to your buyers and just double down on what those opportunities are. And if it's good, make it great. And if it's bad, make it better. Just doing that will just incrementally changing those little things will make much bigger differences to the buying experience. So thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more insights from our Superpowers Index, you can head to dentsu.com/Dentsu B2B/superpowers to actually download a copy of the report and be on the index page to catch much more of these episodes. So we'll see you in the next one.